This episode of the podcast is brought to you by our friends over at Promises Behavioral Health. If you're struggling through the pains of alcohol or drug addiction or a mental health disorder, now's the time to seek the help that you need. Let this be an opportunity to get back on track and get back to finding the real you. I want to tell you this, you're not alone. I thought for so many years that I was alone in this. I was the only one going through it, and it's just not true. Promises Behavioral Health is here for you, and they can help you through that process. They can help guide you to getting some of the help that you need. Now, we've worked with Promises for years now. We know their teams personally. We have great relationships with them. And most importantly, we trust Promises, and so can you. To learn more about Promises treatment options near you, for you, or your loved one, here's what you can do. Go to promisesbehavioralhealth.com/soberguy. That's promisesbehavioralhealth.com/soberguy. Or you can just pick up the phone and call 888-205-1890. That's 888-205-1890 and tell them that you heard about them from That Sober Guy podcast.
That Sober Guy podcast contains adult content, merciless truth, and emotional nudity. Listener discretion is advised.
I'm Shane Raymer. You're listening to That Sober Guy podcast, and we help people stay sober. If it's your first time listening, welcome. I'm so glad that you're here today. Good to be back with you. If you've been listening for a long time, thank you for tuning in today. Thank you for coming back and supporting the show. I have a great guest for you today. His name is Patrick Custer, and I'm so excited to talk with Patrick today. He has a great story, as well as some great resources, a great podcast to share through our amazing partner, Promises Behavioral Health. Here's a quick background on Patrick. He's the National Director of Alumni for Promises Behavioral Health. He's the host of the Rooted Recovery Stories podcast, and he served more than a decade as an addiction recovery advocate and speaker, helping to facilitate change in the lives of those brave enough to seek the help that they need. Such a good point too, man. It does take bravery. It takes some courage to stand up and say, I need some help. I know it's a tough thing for me to do, and that's probably what prohibited me for so many years into getting the help that I finally needed. But man, once I did that, just said, God, like I need some help. It was so powerful, and God really started to move and make some changes in my life. So I just want to encourage anyone, if you're struggling right now and you're really just at a standstill, man, it's okay to reach out for help, man. There's power in reaching out for help, and there's plenty of resources and people who care about you who can help you do that today. So we're going to get to Patrick in just a minute. Just a couple of quick announcements to make. First, are you tired of drinking? Maybe that's why you're here today. We have a great 30-day program designed to help you quit drinking. It's called Quit Drinking Dude, the ultimate men's guide to quit drinking alcohol and stay sober for 30 days or more. You're going to get 30 podcasts in 30 days, as well as some great exercises and takeaways, and a community of support in our locals Sober Guy men's group to help guide you through that 30-day process. So if you want more info on that, you have questions, you can go to quitdrinkingdude.com. You can also contact us at thatsoberguy.com on the contact page there. Also follow us on Instagram at That Sober Guy Podcast. And like I mentioned before, you can join our Sober Guy men's group and check that out. If you want, you can download the Locals app or go to thatsoberguypodcast.locals.com. And everything we talk about, including Patrick's links and the links I just mentioned, will be in the show notes for you, so it's easy to find. And let's get to Patrick today, man. It's so good to have you on the podcast. Thank you so much for taking the time out to come on and hang out.
Absolutely. Excited to be here. It's been a while.
Yeah, it has. I know it has. Yeah. And it's been too long, but hey, we're here now. And I'm really excited to hear a little update on how things are going with you. Of course, I want to hear a little bit about your story. So those listening, maybe this is the first time they've heard you, they can get to know you a bit. First, just a huge shout out to Promises, the whole Promises team. How's Kathy? How's Carly? How's everyone doing over in the Promises world?
Man, our Promises team is everyone's doing great. We're having a little bit of a bittersweet week this week because Kathy is retiring.
No way. So, I didn't know that.
Yeah. So happy for her, and trying to stay happy for her, a little sad for us. And So
wow. Well, Kathy, if you hear this, congratulations. And I know that like there's a lot of people probably excited, including myself, for you. That's like who knows what life holds ahead. At the same time, I feel you, Patrick, on the sadness of that. You're really losing a great person and a great leader, I think, for Promises and just the recovery community too. Well, I shouldn't say losing, but moving on to a different chapter, I guess would be a better way to put it.
That's right.
Yeah.
Well, I told her this week, I said, you left a stamp on a mark on our alumni department. She's, for those of you who don't know, she's who supervised all of our marketing efforts, including alumni and admissions, everything, the chief marketing officer at Promises. And so she's definitely made her mark and left her stamp that will be there for a very long time to come.
Yep.
So even though she's moving on, her work is still there, still running us.
Her ability to connect with people genuinely care. Like I remember when I had the kids and Jess at one of the conferences down in San Diego, and we hung out, just a couple times during, and just hung out and talked. And she's just so sweet to the kids and just hanging out. And we talked a little bit about, staying sober and sobriety and recovery and stuff too. But a lot of the time was just spent like hanging out and just enjoying life together and having good, real conversations. So that's awesome, man. Super excited and a little bit sad at the same time.
Yeah.
So if we kind of transition here, Patrick, for those listening out there who maybe haven't heard about your story and how you kind of came into the work that you're doing today, maybe we can start there and take us back and give us a little look inside your background and your journey of recovery.
Man, all right, I'm going to take it all the way back. So, grew up here in Nashville. I'm in Nashville, Tennessee right now. Grew up here and, in a family, a good family, and, but one that has, our genetics are riddled with, addiction, alcoholism. And, some of my earliest memories are my parents warning me, that alcohol was, dangerous and, stay away and what have you. I'm the youngest of 4 kids, and, my oldest brother's 19 years older than me. And so, he was already in active addiction when I was born, and from my earliest memory till he finally got sober when I think I was 12 or something like that. And so, I grew up in a very black and white household, and what I mean by that is everything was either good or bad, and there was no gray. And my parents, I believe that all parents do the best they can with what they have, like they, once you know better, then you can do better. And, man, I don't know if I had anything different in my upbringing, if I would have, ended up, as an addict or not. But I know that I was told no and wasn't educated on like what alcohol, like, hey, if you're going to drink, this is how to do it. This is the difference between different types of alcohol. It's a bad idea for people like us and our family and everything, but here we're going to arm you and equip you, and so, moving forward, I didn't touch my first drink or drug or cigarette until, I was in my sophomore year of college. And so whatever that would make me, 19, almost 20. And, so I was kind of a late bloomer when it comes to that for, I think, as it's concerned for a lot of people. And, but man, when I started, it was very quickly, I just went down. And my whole drinking using career lasted 4 years. Wow.
Do you remember the first time that you like the feeling or roughly the first time? What was that like?
Absolutely. Man, I love asking this question. I love talking about it because I think it's so, for so many of us, we go through with our questions about life and, all the things that burden us. And, all of a sudden for me, this was a new way to cope that I didn't know I was looking for. And, it was a bit of codependency and peer pressure, if you will. But I also wanted to try it by that point. I was the last of last of really anybody I knew in my circle that hadn't at least tried drinking, and it was beer. And I was at a party, a small party. I mean, like by small, I mean there were probably 7 people there, and this is the narrative that I had in my head about alcohol growing up, alcohol and drugs, just all in one pool together. That it was bad. That if you drink or do drugs, you are certain to go crazy, and end up basically, end up addicted under a bridge, and I don't know that was ever specifically what was spoken into me, but those were the messages that I developed. Sometimes that you don't get when you're being raised, you don't get a verbatim message, but all of the ways that things are talked about and presented for you end up painting a picture, a narrative. And that was my narrative for what it was. So I drink a beer, I drink and I'm like, I'm okay, whatever. I didn't really feel anything. I drink my next beer and I start to feel a little buzzed. I think in total, I drank like 3 or 4 beers that night. It was probably a lot for the first time for somebody, but I just remembered like that, what everybody talks about, that aha moment, that sense of release, ease and peace. And that came over me. And what came after was this internal conversation between with myself, that my parents had lied to me. This didn't feel dangerous, and I didn't feel this need to go back and have more alcohol. I didn't feel a compulsion to go to drink more immediately. The next day, I didn't want to go back and do it again. There wasn't this, I did not have all these awful things that have been told to me, which could or would happen. And so, I'm starting asking myself these questions like, okay, my parents they must be coming from such an extreme place, and I get it. My family, I have family members that died straight up from alcoholism. So I knew that they weren't coming from a place of just making crap up. But, I just felt like, okay, they've exaggerated, they've overreacted. What else have they overreacted about? So this kind of set about for me a whole path of rebellion of everything that I had been raised to believe. I had never rebelled in my life. I was such a good kid. I was homeschooled K through 12, which explains a lot about my personality, but grew up super conservative, wanted to please my parents, be good, do good, all those things. And so it was very interesting, the stage in which that switch was flipped for me, because it was not just the ease and comfort that I got, but my whole worldview all of a sudden started to get cracks in it.
Well, when you mentioned the thought of this idea that you have of what alcohol and drugs would do to you, you'd be on the street, you'd be just, it's going to destroy your life. Right. And we see that's obviously true. Right. But I feel like there's also there's a lot of stigma behind that, in a sense, because it paints the picture that is the worst of what can happen. And there's not hundreds of thousands of other men and women out there who are struggling, just going day to day, taking care of business, but still struggling at the same time. And so when you got to a point and you tried this beer, you're like, wait a minute, that's not the case. You know what I mean? That doesn't really align with what, so I think that although there's some truth to it, that stigma creates some confusion there too. It's really interesting, actually, the thought of that, I think. So what happens from there? Or I'm sorry, if you want to respond to that thought.
No, I was just going to say a resounding, agreement there that, it wasn't until I got into 12 steps and towards the back of the big book, they talk about the different types of drinkers, that there are, and, man, this is the part where I always like to say, if you're asking the question that you're struggling or you feel like, you're having negative, any negative consequences to your drinking, using, if whatever recreational, there's something to that. Follow that questioning. That a negative relationship to substances or even process addictions can come in so many different forms.
Yeah.
And just like that, there's so many different forms of help and healing that are out there. It's not one size fits all, and you're not going to get committed once you say, "Hey, I'm curious that this might be a problem or struggle for me."
Yeah.
I think I always thought in my head that if you were to say something like that, even just to a friend, like the lights are the vehicle with the lights going off is going to be showing up and calling you off. So
the worst you're going to get is maybe like a dude who maybe seems a little weird, or a lady who seems a little weird, giving you their phone number and saying, "Hey, call me." That was always a little weird right at first, but yeah, the cops aren't coming if we reach out. Most of the time, at least. Right?
That's right. Well, I mean, unless we've done something to break the law, right? Yeah. Which ended up being the case for me, but so. I moved on through my drinking, using career, just doing more and more stuff. I always say my drug of slavery was always alcohol. My drug of choice ended up being Adderall. So I was basically speedballing through 4 years of my life. Dang. And the reason why I say that is because alcohol was something that I ended up moving to the place. Like I started off occasions, like the weekend, everybody my age was drinking on the weekend. We basically get super drunk at whatever we were doing. That's the norm when you're 20, right? And at least in where I was in college, it was. But I quickly sloped downhill to where towards the end I was drinking between a half and a whole handle of liquor a day just to avoid going through withdrawal symptoms. And so there was a very stark contrast between, I look back and I think 4 years really isn't that long a period of time when you think about your life as a whole. I'm 35 now, so it was a minute ago, and got sober when I was 24, and but man, there was a lot that happened in those 4 years.
I was going to say, it sounds like
I got a D. Yeah. So I was in college. I was in college for political science, went to Belmont University. I really wanted to be a lawyer. That for a number of reasons just didn't work out. I didn't want to do as much reading as required. I hate to read. It's just not my thing. And that, unfortunately, being an attorney requires a whole lot of reading, a lot more than I'm willing to do. Yeah. And I know it sounds so basic and dumb, but it's the truth, and I just owned it. So moved on and into the sciences. I was working on getting my all my prereqs done for nursing, and got into nursing school. Here's a place I will sidestep and say, again, one of those messages that I always felt wasn't necessarily told directly to me by my family, but was that, I needed to do something huge, impactful, and important, that, whatever I did with my life needed to fall into those categories. And, but I didn't know how I was going to do that. And I don't even remember how I ended up in, going in the nursing route, but I'd already started to experience, by this point, I was a few years in, I'd already had a DUI. I don't remember what other consequences I had, but, I was not highly functioning, I was definitely partying and trying to just maintain. My parents were supporting me, and I worked this whole time that I was in school, but where do you think my work money went? I never contributed to what was keeping me going in school and my living expenses. That all went to my partying lifestyle. And for some reason, I never thought that there was any problem with that mom and dad would foot the bill to support my life, but that everything I earned myself would go to,
Yeah. Did your mom and dad know what was going on, or did they not really have any idea?
At a point they did. I don't remember when. It was a little over, probably halfway through, that they started to, they would, when I'd see them, I might have breakfast with them or something in the middle of the day, and they'd smell alcohol on me because I was drinking at the level that you stink.
Wow.
all day the next day.
Yeah.
You know, that
it's coming out of your pores.
Out of your pores.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Wow.
And, you know, what's crazy is I never thought about it. Even when they would say it to me, I never made the connection between, and it wasn't something that I realized and drew back to before I ever had my first drink. That smell, I remember smelling on people when I was younger, and I was associated with my brother. When we lived in Nashville, he lived back in Texas. So we'd see him, and every time we'd see him, that smell would just wash over me. And you associate it and think like my brother was so bad off when before he got sober, he like barely even spoke. He was always like just
really.
Yeah, it was real bad. And so that's what I associated that smell with. So it wasn't until I actually ended up getting sober, had been out in Dixon, which for those of you who don't know is a country that out in the country where I got sober and stayed out there for a while and sober living. I'd been sober for probably 9 months before I came back into town, and we'd gone to like a hockey game or something, and I smelled that smell on somebody. I didn't smell the entire time I was in my addiction. And I don't know why. It's probably because I smelled the same way, but that smell washed over me, and I was like, whoa, this is what I was living for all these past years. It was a huge just reality check. But moving forward, so in nursing school, I finally, like, this is what I was going to do. This is what it was going to make me feel important, make a change, my stamp on the world. Man, they don't mess around in nursing school. I was barely a month in, and mind you, I had worked really hard, gotten great grades, to get into nursing school. And it was very competitive, here. It probably still is. I didn't get into my third application with perfect grades. And so this was like a 3-semester cycle of applying that it took me to finally get in. I finally get in, and I'm in full blown addiction. So I'm like showing up having like liquor with my coffee every day. Wow. That is not what got me kicked out of the program. I got kicked out of the program because I couldn't get my butt to class or clinicals on time. I'd be a couple minutes late, and they don't tolerate that. And so I got dropped from class. That was one of the most devastating at that time. That was the most devastating thing that had ever happened to me, because they took away my last resort, my last promise of hope to make a difference and make something of myself in the world. I couldn't think of anything else that was going to help me actualize who I needed to be.
Did you blame them at the time? Or was there a sense of like personal responsibility? I'm just curious.
You know what's weird is that I don't remember blaming them, but everything else in my life at that time was absolutely everyone else's fault. I don't know why I didn't. I mean, I think that, like, how do I argue that I think that I remember feeling just, oh God, that was probably the heaviest sense of grief that I ever started to feel. And that grief that I experienced somehow through the mass amounts of liquor and amphetamines that I was ingesting each day, that grief still came through, and I was able to feel it. So very much. So like a good addict, what did I do? I still put on my lab coat every day. I was living at home at this point with my parents and going to school. I put on my lab coat every day and got up and left the house and quote unquote went to school, because I could not. It started off with like, I just can't face this. I can't own this. I can't just own it internally. Like, I know it happened, but I can't live in this reality yet, much less invite anyone else important to me into this reality, i.e. my parents. And so I just, one day at a time, kept saying, I'll deal with it tomorrow. I'll tell them tomorrow. I'll get honest tomorrow. Today, I cannot feel this. I can't let myself feel this. And I would just go wherever, either to my friend's house that weren't in school at the time or whatnot. I mean, and I would proceed to drink all day.
Oh, wow.
And man, I lived the next 6 months like that to where I kept my circle small. My friends that I was hanging out with, I kept them separate, because what would happen is I didn't want anybody asking questions. This is where the disease really set in and start to drive.
Yeah.
I mean, not that the disease wasn't driving the boat the whole time, but you can really see it, because this wasn't me. I'm not. My mom will even tell you, as a little kid, I would always tell myself, I'm not a liar.
Yeah.
And I would go hop around from, I never wanted to be by myself. I'm naturally without addiction. I'm a 7 Enneagram. I'm the enthusiast. I'm outgoing. I like to be with people. That's how I recharge. And, so I would go from person to person, friend to friend. If they had to go to work or they had to go to school or whatever, I'd, see who else was free to hang out and whatnot. Whenever I wasn't, I would tell them, oh, well, I've got to go to class too. So, and I'd leave and go to class and go hang out with whoever else. So I'm weaving this giant thread of lies to everyone in my life. Man. And
in your lab coat.
Yeah. Still. Isn't that great?
Yeah.
And that lasted all the way through an entire semester and crossed over into the next semester. And my parents still would make comments, but they didn't have the receipts to come at me and say, like, you are outright lying. Like, I think they just thought I was struggling really bad. I don't think they knew that I hadn't been in school. Wow. And I look back and I just think about how badly I manipulated my parents out of money and time and their, emotional distress, worrying about me. Everything ended up culminating at it was February 16th of 2011. My dad had a couple days before, he had a major pulmonary embolism, and so, like, for those of you who don't know, his was like a 2-foot long blood clot that went through his lungs, and had to have open heart surgery, and I didn't go to the hospital to see him. Everybody in our family went. I didn't go. I remember telling myself that, because back then people still had landlines at their house. And I remember telling myself, I need to be at home in case any of the people, like from church or our life or whatever, call and are worried about Dad. And that was my excuse, that I was going to stay home and play, manage the line, whatever, and the stuff we tell ourselves. Yeah. And so I didn't go see my dad in the hospital when he was on his, they said he really should have died. And I'm so glad he didn't, because that would have been forever on my conscience. And my siblings ended up coming back to my parents' house while I was there. And they knew what had been going on, and they had been doing some checking, and whether or not they had the truth, they really had the receipts to be able to prove that I wasn't still in school. They acted like they did, and I believed them. And I remember my brother saying, "Patrick, it's this is up. Your mom and dad aren't coming home from the hospital to you. You're either going to accept help right now, or you're going to leave and find somewhere to go, and we're not going to worry about it." And I accepted help, because I was at the point of just like, I don't know what else to do. Yeah. I didn't have any other plans,
What did help look like?
So they took me out to a treatment center. It was a 12-step boot camp, like I said, out in Dixon, Tennessee. Yeah. And it's actually where my oldest brother had gotten sober as well.
Is he still sober?
14 years. Yeah, he is.
Oh, that's awesome. That's so cool.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep. And so, man, we talk about surrender. Surrender was not, I had like a little bit of surrender, because I was like, I don't want to be on the street and I don't have any money, so I'll go to treatment, but that was as much surrender as I had at that point. So I go to treatment, and 2 weeks in, at the beginning, they ask you, legal, do you have any legal stuff going on? How much have you been drinking? This whole list of questions that they need to know before they bring you on property and all those things. Of course, I did not tell the truth about how much I was drinking, just because I was embarrassed about it. And I was still living the lie of, I'm not drinking more than I should. I'm just choosing to, by the way. It's not out of control. It's all choice. Yeah, I had a real trouble admitting that I was an alcoholic. This was all at this point. Just I hadn't exerted my willpower, and I was admitting that I was at a place where my life was a wreck. But I just needed to pull my bootstraps up, and I was going to be okay. And so, 2 weeks into treatment, I remember them pulling me in. The Williamson County sheriffs had showed up at my parents' house and served a warrant for my arrest because I don't even remember. It was one of the legal things that I had. I'd written bad checks. I'd stolen liquor from a liquor store. I don't even remember if I had finally dealt with my DUI. Like I was real good at catching legal charges, going to that initial portion of jail, and then being like, okay, I'll show up to my court date, and then I never show up. Yeah. And so I was getting served for something. Yeah. And in my defense, like, man, my memory was horrible. I couldn't even remember who the president was at the time when I went into treatment. Oh, wow. So I couldn't have told them exactly what I might have been in trouble legally for, but I definitely knew there was stuff out there that I needed to deal with that I had let loose. So anyway, they have they'll come to Jesus moment with me at treatment, and they were like, look, your parents don't know if they're going to continue paying for treatment. They don't know what they want to do with you. They're not going to enable anymore. You've been lying to them. You've been lying to us. We don't feel like you want it. And by wanting it, I was like, what do you mean? And they were like, want it. Like, you don't act like you want this. You don't want sobriety. What do you want? And I was like, I don't know. I'm trying. I'm showing up to meetings. And they said that showing up is not what gets you sober, what lays the path to recovery. And, we don't even know that we want a bad apple in our bunch, not, spoiling the bunch. If you don't want to be here, you're not going to do what it takes and put one foot in front of the other. We're just going to have to see. And that was all I needed, man. That level of pressure that brought me to my knees, I hadn't experienced before. I'd manipulated my parents for so long whenever any pressure was applied. And I was finally at a place where my parents weren't there. They were saying no. Yeah. And the people in charge of me there were also saying no. And man, I had this shining light, like aha moment, spiritual experience. And I just remember going back to my room being like, okay, I need to do whatever it takes. I'm just going to ask what I need to do every day because I want it. I don't know what wanting it is or what it looks like, but I want it. So I'm going to ask, and I'm going to do my very best for whoever's in charge of me at the moment or in leadership to try and absorb what it is I should be doing because my plan is not working. Yeah. And that is what I needed. That was ultimately what I needed. It was the thing that finally saved my life because it made it possible for me to establish that real foundation of sobriety moving forward.
It's like a bit of tough love, a bit of honesty, a lot of desperation. It sounds like on your end, just that bottom where we're just like, God, like, what do we do? Like, I feel like I'm trying, but at the same time, I know I'm not. Like, how do we do this? And so, that's it's huge, it's huge. And so when you start to make some progress through that, like, what does that look like? And what is life like, today, just being sober and, and I want to get into a little bit of the aftercare, thoughts as well too, but what does life look like?
Fortunately, they both intertwine very well. So they were kind of sneaky about the process, even though I was super in surrender mode. They came to me at the end of 30 days and they were like, we think you need to do aftercare. And aftercare where I went meant it was basically just more months of residential in a different housing section, and your day programming looked different. So I was like, okay, if that's what you think, I'll do that. I didn't expect it, but okay, sure. Took it one day at a time, 1 week at a time, 1 month at a time. Ended up doing what I think was like 3 months of aftercare. So 4 months in total of like living somewhere doing treatment like work.
I want to point one thing out, just in case there's somebody listening and they're going, what the heck is aftercare? Can you just give us just a quick rundown of what aftercare is?
Yes. So like I said, aftercare there looked different. Typical aftercare, when we use that word, is, when it encompasses like alumni services. Usually it's anything. I mean, people sometimes refer to intensive outpatient as aftercare. So once you're done with treatment, when you go stay somewhere, it can be it's the care that you receive afterwards. So therapy, one-on-one therapy, it can be IOP. But in the most general term, usually what we're referring to is alumni services. So many of the treatment facilities, and like we have at Promises, every single one, we have a national alumni program, which this is what I also got involved with and lit my ass on fire about recovery. Once I got out of the extended programming, I was living in sober living. And I just got really involved with volunteering and alumni services and the meetings, the community meetings and all those things. Talking about that fellowship that wells up around you. Yeah. Some people want it, some people don't, but let me tell you, everyone benefits from it. Mm-hmm. That whole saying about the connection being the opposite of addiction is so very true. And on the days we want it, on the days we don't want it, it's there for us. And so I'm going to kind of transition. I ended up working in treatment, some type of treatment, from then all the way till now. I knew at that point, I was like, hey, I'm taking it one day at a time, but right now this door is open for me. And it looks like a way that I can fulfill what I always felt was important, was a passion to help people in some way, shape, or form. And it fit with what I was trying to do with my life in two ways. I wanted to stay sober and give back, and I wanted to do, I wanted my profession to be helping people. So I didn't have a roadmap, but that was enough. It was simple, and that was enough for me. And I have continued my life ever since then the same way. I've stayed out of the future, which is so weird because the world asks you, what do you want to do in 5 years? What do you want to this? What do you want to that? And I'm like, man, I know a little bit sometimes today at 11 years sober. I know that, but living in today in this moment right now is it's not overrated. It's not for people like us. Yeah. And so I continued. I've worked just about every department you can think of in treatment. And a few years ago, when we at Promises started our National Alumni Program, Kathy Frossard asked me to develop it. And because it had been one of my passions early on, and she knew that when we got to know each other. And so at Promises, we're the parent company of a number of residential treatment centers across the United States, and we have alumni programming at each facility. It's called Rooted Alumni, and rooted because we keep you rooted, right? Once you leave treatment. And we have everything from in-person meetings, virtual meetings, monthly service projects, which I think are so fun. It's awesome to give it back, especially once you're sober. Monthly fun events where you're kayaking, canoeing, going on roller coasters, going to a beach bonfire, whatever, you name it. We do really fun, cool stuff. Learn how to have joy again in recovery and have fun, camaraderie, sober. And
it's possible.
Yes. And we do follow-up calls to stay connected, where we're calling you and checking on you and seeing how you're doing. And one of the coolest things that I love, I call it it's our annual celebration. It's called Homecoming. We have at each facility. So it's a recovery festival that we have once a year, where everybody comes back on campus, the places that help save their life, start their recovery journey, or continue their recovery journey for some, and reconnect with the staff, fellow alumni, just get, refreshed and reignited about their recovery journey.
Yeah.
So that Promises is what aftercare is.
Yeah, I love it. And thank you for breaking it down and giving us a little bit of the details behind it. And it's so important. Like, I can remember, when I went to treatment myself, and and I'm not, I don't want to say treatment was easy. There was a lot, man. And I jumped the same way. I dove in head first and I was like, okay, I'm making a decision. I'm all in, like everything's in here now. And so there was that part of it, but man, going home and trying to integrate back into work and like my family and be this new husband and dad who was like, I no longer have, the tools that I use to deal with life anymore. I have these new tools. That aftercare part was so important. And we had some stuff, some similar stuff with the place that I went to where there was meetups. And I think I did, they suggest the 90 and 90, like lots of meetings. And I was really trying to stay connected. But man, point is, it was just so hard. But also the point is, for me, is that, man, I was able, just like you mentioned, to find genuine fun and genuine joy. And I was able to find myself, like, who the heck am I? Like, as this dude in this world, experiencing this life, like I was numb to it for 32, 17 years at least, of the run. But that aftercare part, huge. And it's so awesome that you've been able to pour back and be of service. You talked about that a couple times in the last, 10, 15 minutes. That service component is so important to us being able to stay out of our own way and help others. It's huge, man. So how is that going for you? Just building the program, doing the podcast now, just being a part of a great organization, just getting to help a lot of people.
Yeah, we've watched it grow leaps and bounds. And we've got over 2,000 active alumni right now, which is just so cool. We helped, our department alone helped to get 2,300 people into treatment this past year, which is nice. That when I saw that number in January, it just flooded me with emotions because that many lives saved is a big deal.
It's huge.
And so I would say that we're doing good. We're thriving and we're changing lives. And it's one of those things where I have a hard time when, I'm sitting at a table of friends and everybody, people are like, man, I don't know, my job, rolling their eyes and like, I cannot identify or relate. Like, cause I go home every day and put my head on the pillow, knowing I'm right where God wants me to be. And, I'm so grateful because not everybody has that, has the ability to, just to say that about what they they go and do every day for work. And so one thing I wanted to mention, I'm going to try and say it really quick, and I'm going to have to leave a bunch of details out, but it's worth mentioning. One of the things that kept me going drinking, fear, I think, is what keeps most people using and drinking. And one of my biggest fear ever since I was a little kid was that I was going to get a brain tumor and die. And let's see, it was 4 years into sobriety in 2016. I had been struggling really bad with some symptoms that were unexplained. Couldn't figure out what it was. Took like a year before I finally got a brain scan, and they found it, and it was a brain tumor, and it was a pretty intense process. They thought it was very, initially they thought it was really severe, aggressive form of cancer. I found out, they told me I was admitting to the hospital the next day. And let me backtrack here real quick. When I first got sober and I really realized I want this and I can do recovery and I can do sobriety. And I don't care that I will never drink again. Like I can conceive that concept, but I could not. If I was ever told that I had a terminal illness, I was like, I don't know that I can handle that. My psyche can't. It's the fear there is so overwhelming. I remember thinking that, like, this fear that has always haunted me my whole entire life. And so it was Monday morning. They brought me into the doctor's office. They said, Mr. Custer, we figured out what's wrong with you. So sorry. Spend the day with your family. Pack your bags. We're going to need you to come in. There's a good chance you'll have brain surgery this week.
Oh my gosh.
We're going to run further tests. So I go home. I didn't drink. I didn't pick up. I made it till the next day, till I got to the hospital, and I did not relapse. It did end up being severe enough. I had brain surgery, and I ended up, it was super severe. I was in the hospital in the ICU on and off for like 6 months after. That was a huge story of recovery, but I made it through, and I made it to the other side without relapsing. And there's so much more to that story. But the piece that I wanted to share is that, we tend to look at the narrow scope of, right now getting our shit together, getting our lives together, and which is so important, right? When we do first get sober. But if you're out there and you're wondering, like, man, what do I do if life happens, and my worst fear happens? Do a program, stay in a community, get a community, say yes to being connected to like-minded people that are trying to do the same thing you are, work a program so that when that happens, you have the strength and the support, and you can do it. I don't, none of us are guaranteed an outcome for tomorrow, but I do believe, because I lived that experience, that I made it through to the other side, and I used all of my tools, and I was able to stay sober, that it's possible.
Yeah, man, that's insane, bro. I can't believe that. Like, you get that news, and it's funny that you had that thought as a child too. That's super strange. And then it's like a manifestation almost, or who knows what you call it, but that's very interesting and crazy at the same time. And so is that like totally done with, like, you had the brain surgery? You still have to deal with some of that stuff today, or?
So it ended up being benign, and I have to go get annual brain scans. And so haven't had any recurrence yet. And this is I'm waiting for the results actually back from my 5-year scans. And so I find out pretty soon if I get to 5-year, meaning like I've done 5 years of annual screenings, and I think I get to move to a once every 5 or once every 10 after this, if there's no recurrence. So that's kind of an exciting milestone for me to hit.
Well, and so. I want to point, and that I think so. You're having to do those, those checkups, and then 5 years down the road, it's like, okay, cool. Like I'm at, you're right, a milestone in a sense. And in another sense, what I just thought of was, in this weird way, you took something like a brain tumor and brain surgery and, this whole experience, and in something that crazy and scary, it sounds like it gave you this perspective on life of this huge blessing of like the experience of life. So like, I'm a big proponent of being able to look at the glass half full versus half empty. And how do we do that? How do we reframe things up? And so if we were to do that in this case, like, you actually received something pretty awesome in this crappy experience. Do you know what I mean?
Yep. Yeah. Usually when I'm telling my story, I always bring this into the picture, saying that, like, I walked away from this. People, I even just start telling the story. People go, "Oh my gosh, you poor thing," and they have a million questions about how bad it was and all this stuff. And yes, it was very bad. And yes, I almost died. I had like secondary, third, fourth, fifth complications that were really severely serious. And there was a fork in the road. I remember my neurosurgeon saying, he said, "Look, there's 2 ways to go about this that I tell all my patients." And he was like, "You're at this very fork in the road, and I think that you're on a right path." But again, I had so many recurring complications. Like, I was on oxygen. I had a blood clot in my lungs. I got MRSA in the back of my head where they did surgery. Like, it was nuts. And so when I talk about the choice to recover, at that point, he was saying, I believe in the power of perspective. And he said, you can either choose to be a lifelong patient or choose to take life by the horns and say, no, I'm going to live. I might have a new normal, but I'm going to live the heck out of the rest of my life. And I've never forgotten those words, and they've continued to encourage me to this day, because I had a lot of new normal that was going on for me, that, like, when there's the landscape of the insides of the back of my head, where a lot of things are different for me now, but I believe that in the power of perspective so much, and that just encouraged me to go continue veering into that right direction, so that, because man, it could go one of two ways so quickly. I mean, when you're talking about addiction, when you're talking about recovering from anything, dealing with anything emotionally in life, physical, medical. And so,
man, it's been fun. I'm glad we got to hang out today, and thank you so much for sharing, some of your story. I know it's hard to get, a whole, lifetime of experience and stories in 45 minutes. One of the things I wanted to say before we kind of wrap up is, you had mentioned early on in the podcast today, that your goal and your feeling of purpose, even when you were young, was that you wanted to help people. And no, you didn't become a lawyer. No, you didn't become a nurse, but you're right where God has you right now, helping and serving others in this amazing capacity. And it's pretty awesome to see, through all the things, you've kind of created your own destiny in that matter, I feel like. And I just want to, just say that's awesome, and say super proud to get to know you a bit and have you on the podcast and hear a little bit more, man. Yeah, it's pretty awesome.
Thanks. It is pretty cool. It's cool to get to live it too.
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely. So two things. First, if there's someone struggling out there and man, they're just going through it right now, they don't know what to do, what advice or encouragement could you give them?
Oh my gosh, ask for help. And if the only thing that you can do, if the very smallest crack in the dam that you can do is tell somebody in your life that you're struggling, even if it's not calling a phone number, even if it's not dialing, on a website, tell somebody in your life. Do not keep it a secret.
Yeah.
And start that process of not keeping it a secret. If you can pick up the phone or get on the computer and chat, I would encourage you to call us at Promises, and talk to our admissions team about what your options might be for getting help, because there's a lot of help out there, y'all. And, this is such a great pod. We love Shane and his podcast here. I encourage you also to check out the podcast we have, Rooted Recovery Stories. Our episodes are all very similarly all about hope and people's stories of how they've overcome adversity and recovery as well. There are a lot of resources, and I would say anything you can do to step out of that cloak of denial and start to take some ownership for what's going on in your life. Whatever that looks like for you, just put one foot out and see what happens.
Yeah, it's good. The cloak of denial. I've never heard that before, and that's a good one right there. I think that describes it well. Patrick, thank you so much, man. And we'll be sure to put the Promises link. We'll put the phone number. We'll put all the links from everything we talked about today. Once again, it'll be in the show notes. You can find it there. Any last words? Anyone wants to reach out to you specifically, Patrick, or should they just go to the Promises website, or any takeaways there?
Sure. You can connect with me specifically if you want to. I'm on my Instagram, Patrick_Custer. Again, the Recovery Stories Instagram is Rooted Recovery Stories. And the other stuff's going to be in the show notes. I always end my podcast by saying this, so I'm going to say it. I love it. I think it's so great that you're only one decision away from a completely different life, and it's never too late to start loving yourself.
Oh, that's good, man. I love it. Good stuff, Patrick. Thanks so much for coming on the show today, man. Appreciate you.
Awesome. Thanks. Appreciate you.
Yes, share the podcast with a friend. You can connect with us on Instagram at That Sober Guy Podcast and join our locals men's group. Love to see you in there. Love you guys, man. There's always hope. Reach out if you need some help. Peace, love, and respect. Keep your blood clean.